All right, here we go. Quick video on chapter 4.4, evaluating trig functions given some restrictions. All right, so in these situations, you're going to be given something, maybe tangent, sine, a cosine. You're going to be given some values, probably not an angle in this case, and also you'll be given some restriction whether there's one of the quadrants, maybe sine or cosine, or tangent might be positive or negative. So here's just a quick little three-step method that I use to find the values of the 6 trig functions, because that's normally what you'll have to do in these situations. So it says, example, given that tangent of theta is negative 2 over 3, and we'll look at where this negative is placed here in a moment, but we should be able to understand what that means and how it describes the angle. And cosine is greater than 0. So this means that cosine is positive. So what we want to do, and they say find all 6 trig functions. All right. So what we want to do is first sketch the given information. All right. Sketch it so we can see. Now remember, quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Make sure you label all your quadrants. Secondly is remember where sine is positive, cosine's positive, tangent's positive. Remember this little acronym. All students take calculus. Here, everyone's positive. Quadrant 1, everything's positive. We're positive in the x direction. We're positive in the y direction. Tangent's positive. Everything's positive. Here, we're going in the negative x direction. So our sine values are positive because they're in the positive direction. So tangent will be negative over here. So the only one that's positive is sine. Down here, we're going in the negative x direction and we're going in the negative y direction. So that means that our those values are negative, and sine and cosine are negative, but our tangent, t for tangent, is positive. Fourth quadrant, excuse me. We have calculus, and that means that cosine is positive. Again, we're in the positive x direction, and we're in negative y direction. So tangent and sine will both be negative in this quadrant. All right, so they told us that tangent is negative 2 over 3, but cosine is positive. So as I come in the x direction here, I'll note that 3 is to be the positive number, because tangent is opposite over adjacent. The opposite side over the adjacent side. The opposite side over the adjacent side. So I make sure I label it properly. 3 will remain positive, and the 2 will be negative because it's in the negative y direction. So I've labeled it. We always draw these triangles away from the origin, out and then up towards the x-axis. We remember that. We always remember draw up towards the x-axis and this inside here will be our theta. Okay, so we've got it drawn. We've got a pretty good idea. But what are we missing? We're missing the hypotenuse if we're going to find all the others, because sine and cosine, they require hypotenuse. So how do we do that? Well, step 2, use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. A squared plus b squared is c squared, okay? So we have here 3 squared, that was one of the sides, plus negative 2 squared is equal to the hypotenuse, or c squared. That gives us 9 plus 4 is c squared. We take the square root, the principal root of both sides, and we get 9 plus 4 is the square root of 13. So we now know that our hypotenuse is the square root of 13. So the square root of 13. Remember, the hypotenuse is always positive, so we make sure we keep that intact. Okay. Back over here. Square root of 13 is now the hypotenuse. So now we can go ahead and start answering some of these questions that we have. We've got everything labeled. We know the values. We have the correct signs. And now we're able to find the 6 trig functions. So the sine, remember sine was opposite over hypotenuse. The opposite over here was negative 2, and the hypotenuse was square root of 13. So we can fill this in with negative 2 over the square root of 13. Now, the cosine. Well, the cosine was the adjacent side, and we know from the adjacent side that was 3, so we'll get 3 over square root of 13. And they gave us tangent, and that was negative 2/3. All right? Now we'll go the opposite direction here. We'll start with cotangent first because this is an easy reciprocal to take. Remember, cotangent is the reciprocal function of the tangent. And so we can get negative 3/2. Secant is going to be 1 over cosine. So what we can do is just take the reciprocal again of the cosine of 3 over root 13. And so we get root 13 over 3. We can do the same thing for the cosecant, which is the friend of sine. Right? These two hang out together. And when they do, this guy is the reciprocal of him. So we'll take square root of 13 over 2. We'll make that negative. Now you might ask yourself, well, why didn't he rationalize these? And that's okay for now. We can leave them unrationalized. If we really wanted to, we could rationalize the denominator. It would be a little bit more thorough of an answer. But since we're finding the 6 trig functions, I think it's okay at this moment to leave them with a radical in the denominator. All right? Hopefully that helped with your evaluating trig functions given some restrictions. All right? Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.